So just to talk about the speakers, I'm going to cover the landscape on alternative data. Elias is going to cover the Agro Bureau. And then we have Jennifer from Korean Credit Bureau and Roth from CBC will talk about cross-border. So we're going to go through some presentations in those orders. So hopefully they'll be of use. I will try and get my presentation up. I always come up with a swan analogy when we do these conferences because it all looks so seamless, and there's people at the back there going, "What the hell? What am I going to do?" So, thank you very much, team at the back. We're on it. So this is the paper that I'm going to quickly take you through. It's quite a comprehensive landscape report. So I'm not going to go through all the detail, but as Colin mentioned, it is something that we continually monitor. It is something we originally reported on back in 2018. But because of the changes, a lot of those changes brought on by technology and digitalization, we felt it was appropriate to run another report as an update. So the reports we do produce sometimes are policy papers, sometimes are research papers. They're not necessarily always that. Sometimes they will have recommendations, sometimes they'll have considerations in them. So I'm being quite specific about the words. That follows very much a World Bank sort of type approach in terms of how they will, when they produce some research and policy and guidance, how they express that. And I'll cover that a little bit later. This report is available now, as Collins mentioned. It is available and has been published in the last few days on the BIA website. So if you wish to go and look it up on the BIA website, you'll find it in our publication section. Ingrid's given me prompts. But I'd certainly recommend downloading it. I think the survey's been quite useful, and it was quite comprehensive, as Colin mentioned. So if we talk about what we talk about in this is obviously all the different types of alternative data, and there are a number of different types of alternative data, but it is important, I think, to define them, and this is what the paper tends to start off with. What do we mean by alternative data? So you've got the consumer financial behavior data, as we've talked about there. Some of this may be seen by some of you as not necessarily alternative, maybe mainstream now, but there is a large number of countries around the world. This is still alternative data. The telco data, these are just examples that are on there. Text messages, digital wallets, all these type of developments that are happening. Then we have the consumer lifestyle and habit data. That's maybe a little bit more, some people might call that within the sort of social media type of stuff that is being talked about. And that's where we talk about app usage. We've then got the business information, operations and analytics. Obviously, bear in mind, we talk here not just about consumer data, but also business information as well. Housing and utility management. Again, some of this may well be seen, housing not necessarily. When we say housing, we probably mean rental data. But there is that discussion around rental data and utility management. You'll be aware that there are certain countries that are undertaking various initiatives around rental data and inclusion of that. There are others where it's still being considered. There are others where there are some countries where utility data is already provided to the bureaus. There are other countries where it's still a long way off. Then there's the risk management and insurance sort of data as we talk about, and that's where we've got interesting things like weather forecast data, insurance data, and that's maybe a little bit related to somewhat to where Elias will probably come in from his agro bureau type of thing, I think. And then we've obviously got other data down there in terms of market and environmental insights, which again, brings you into the ESG type of work and alternative data that may well be necessary from that. And then you've obviously got that sort of regulatory compliance data as well. So that's just an outline of some of the data I think that we sort of looked at and approached. The emerging business models, obviously, they're seen as sort of 6 of these. There's the credit reporting entities, integrating with alternative data in their databases. This is, I'm sure, what a lot of you are already involved in. This is ongoing, and building that data in. Then you do have, obviously, the Other model, which is interesting, where you've got banks partnering with alternative scoring providers. In some countries there is a distinct development of alternative credit scoring providers, and them building their own databases. And I think this is where the report sort of says, well, that does exist, and that's maybe where you have to consider when we talk about policy and recommendation. How do they fit in? What are the rules and regulations around that? And then you have alliances, as we talk about there, between credit reporting agencies and fintechs. Some of you may already have some developments where you're ongoing with those two. There has been some developments reported on that. And then you have obviously advancements in open frameworks. Now this is changing the direction slightly. This is sort of almost the open data, open finance world that is certainly coming. It's in certain parts of the world, it's developing faster than others, but it is a key consideration where data is very much permission given and being used with things like API links and other things like that. So that I think is a key one. That's generating a lot of data, not necessarily generating data for the credit bureaus and the traditional sources, but obviously there is that data then starting to flow. And this is where the ICCR is looking at these things and saying, well, with these developments, how should they progress? What is the framework that should be there for this data to develop? Then we have tech companies, which are a very broad category, but obviously they will be generating a lot of their own data. It's probably a bit old-fashioned now, but there's still a lot of data being generated by the Googles and the other parts of this world in terms of the data. And how they're using that data, and they're using that data actively in risk assessment as much as anything, and a recognition by them that there is some value in that data, and how do they manage it. So, and then you obviously got the emergence of credit building products, which is an interesting one. I was talking to Peter about this over breakfast this morning, where obviously you are getting a lot of development where people are recognizing the importance of credit reporting. And actually, there are organisations now are trying to capture people, maybe not necessarily the underserved, but they're trying to build credit profiles for individuals. And those, again, if you may well come in your own, you may see, and it may be not so much in this part of the world, but in more developing economies, you will see when the knowledge and understanding of credit reporting starts to appear in consumers, they will start to understand the importance of it, and they will then start to actually question, why they can't get credit, and understand what they need to do. And there will be organisations who will come along and try and pick up on some of those people and say, this is how we can improve your credit profile. And there's an interesting response to a lot of those developments. So that we've gone through the landscape. We talked about the different types of data. We talked about the different types of models which are generating that data. And I'm not going to go through all of these, but what the work and the landscape paper found is that there are two broad categories really. There is a prescriptive approach. So there is where there's concern about some of this new data, and a lot of credit bureaus already regulated, but where these new models are coming into play, regulators saying, well, there needs to be some framework for this, and therefore, they will move forward with regulation. And you see a few examples there. That's not exhaustive. You'll see more examples in the paper, but you can see around the world there that there are some prescriptive measures being put in place where regulators are really making sure that they're protecting the interest of the individuals. And then you have also another, which is, I suppose, the soft and, as I say, the sort of incremental approach, which is one which is of a nurturing capacity. So it's really trying to nurture the data, and that's where regulators are probably monitoring, working with the industry, getting the industry to self-regulate. And I'm sure some of you are involved in self-regulatory environments. Some of you are more involved in regulatory environments. I think from an Asia Pacific perspective, probably the temptation is to be probably more regulatory in the approach, but I think you will find that there are others, and it may well be that as these things develop, the regulators will work more with the industry to actually develop the way forward. So these are the recommendations, and again, so these are recommendations. So if you think about the wording, recommendation means this is what is being recommended by the ICCR as a standard-setting body of some of the things that you should do as a regulator in your own country. So these are recommendations. These are things that we hope that regulators will take away and will actually think on and see whether they're relevant. Not all of these recommendations will be relevant for every country, but they are really trying to set a basic level of what we think should happen when you have a developing alternative data landscape. So, I mean, obviously the first one is quite clear. I think the ICCR believes that when there is this new data around, there should be some legal and regulatory frameworks to protect the individuals and businesses whose data it relates to. Now, I come from a commercial background. BIA represents the commercial industry, but even BIA has a policy and is well supportive of proper and sensible regulatory frameworks, because everybody knows then what they can do and what they can't do, and it does help the development of the industry. So there's no surprise that recommendation 1 is all about the implementation of a robust and legal regulatory framework. You can go further and talk about the workability and of these frameworks, and that's another big debate which we can have another time. But I think it does recognise that it is there. The other one is quite an interesting one, which is quite strong, but it's actually this sort of what we call a regulatory blacklist, which I think is some interesting terminology. But it's all about making sure that data is proper data used in credit scoring. There's an understanding of what data is used, and there's an understanding of what data can't be used. For a long time, credit bureaus will tell you when they've been doing credit scoring that they've had to deal with regulations like sex and the like, and other types of data like that. But this is basically a recommendation saying if there is data, and I suppose this relates back to things like social media data. What should you use, what shouldn't you use for the benefit of the individual? So, that's an interesting one. We haven't seen that picked up. Well, it'd be interesting to see if that is picked up when the report comes out. But I think the idea is that it's sensible, really. It's regulators making sure that there are boundaries, and it's connected with the framework, really, about what data and what data can't be used. And then we obviously have the third recommendation, which is an interesting one, which is recognizing the more nurturing approach, which is to say that, with all this constant development going on, regulators should try and nurture some platforms for people to actually experiment and understand what data can be used. And this is where you think of things like sandboxes, and you will see and have heard more and more in this particular region the implementation by certain regulators of sandboxes where this data can go into an environment which is working with the regulator to understand how that data can be used, and that I think is something we'll see more of in this particular part of the world. And then obviously we've got this fourth recommendation, which is the promotion of the adoption of consumer permission data. This goes back to open data. So this is recognizing from an ICCR perspective that open data is here to stay and will play a part. A number of bureaus already pick up data from open data sources and add that to the bureaus. But I think it's basically saying make sure that if there is this open data, that there is permission. As a credit bureau, and sometimes not necessarily with business information providers, but maybe with business information providers when you're dealing with individuals, we all know that it's fairly much that you need to have that consent. I'm sure all of you work on a consent basis in some form or the other. This is saying really where you do have open data, there needs to be some consent in that process so that the individual is well aware of where that data is going and how that data is being used. Recommendation 5 is the one that, interestingly, I saw a few people raise their eyebrows when we said the term sex disaggregation. I should have got Colin probably to explain that a little bit more, but this is basically, there is a theory that obviously in some ways credit scoring has always been put forward as a way in which you can ensure there is consistency and there isn't bias in granting credit. Sometimes you can actually find that there is a bias against indirectly against certain sexes, and this is where there's been this big work going on sex disaggregation, which is trying to say is scoring actually helping certain females, for example, or is it actually not helping them? Is it actually disadvantaging them? So that's work is going on. That's separate, but I think there needs to be again recognition that you don't get unfortunate bias in some of this alternative credit scoring against certain segments of the population. And maybe we'll talk a little bit about that later on. I know Frederick, who's going to talk from Advanced Robo, is going to talk a little bit about some of that sort of data. Establishment of an industry code of practice. Well, I think that is one where if you're not going to go down the regulatory route, or even if you do go down the regulatory route, there is also quite, I think, it's also useful to have a code of practice. And as industry practitioners, I would encourage you to think about that because alongside regulation, it's also very useful in helping your people whose data you hold, individuals and businesses, understand how you handle that data, and especially on alternative data, where it's more mature markets with traditional credit bureau data. You obviously there's an understanding with alternative data, being able to say to people, this is how we handle your data. It may well be that you just reissue your current code of practice for what you do with normal traditional data, but certainly I think it would be useful to do that. And then obviously on recommendation 7, there's obviously this one about risk-based approach to collection and use of data. So be aware of the risks of it. So don't naturally just say, I will take it all in. We're recommending that you make some sort of risk assessment when you do take that data in. Those of you who've studied privacy regulation will know that there are impact assessments. Is a common term that is used in privacy regulation, where privacy regulators will ask you to do an impact assessment about the data and how it should be used. And this is really picking up on that point. You should, if you're taking alternative data, make sure you're doing an impact assessment to understand the pros and cons of that, and to make sure that you don't just take all that data in. You're fully aware of where that data is coming from, permissions you've got, and how you can use that data. And then there's policy considerations. So these are really where we're saying this is where regulators may want to think about adopting some of this. And these policy recommendations will fit different countries in different ways, depending upon how mature and developing they are. So obviously the first one there is actually incentivizing digitalization. Now you may say, well, what's that got to do with alternative data? But I think it's basically saying that there is data and there is data of benefit from digitization. So it's actually a consideration for regulators to say it's key, really, I think, that you promote the digitalization. And it's the theme of our conference for the next 2 days. So I think that links in very well with that. So that's really a policy consideration. So think about digitalization, think about the benefits it can deliver. Then you've got the other one, really, which is quite interesting, which is probably fitting a little bit more. Well, it fits both with the consumer and the business side, which is actually a recommendation saying the government should think about digitizing services. There is a benefit in some of that digitalization of government services. Malaysia, we know, and that's the reason why we're here in KL for this conference this year, is very much leading the way in terms of digitalization and digitalization of government services. And I think we'll hear more about that tomorrow in the opening remarks from Deputy Secretary General from the Ministry of Digital. But it is saying that there's a role to play here for governments as well to digitalize that data, and that data can help in the risk assessment and credit reporting. Then we have, then there's obviously another policy consideration, which is supporting the infrastructure. So again, that's connected with the digitalization. If we're going to benefit from this data, you need to have an infrastructure to do that. Do you have the sufficient mobile networks and all the rest of it available, the internet access and the like. And then we have the fourth one, which is about literacy, and I think this is a very sensible one, and consumer awareness, and one I've always advocated in my long history of working with credit bureaus, is that it's very easy to forget that it's, you're dealing with individual and businesses' data, and that there should be some literacy programs there. I've been monitoring very closely the work that's been going on in Cambodia through the CBC on literacy, and I'm very pleased to see that. It's one of the recommendations I did when I did an impact assessment for the country. But it is good, and you should bear that in mind. And as you develop as credit bureaus and business information providers, please don't lose that fact that you really do need to make sure there is literacy there and there is consumer awareness. And then the other policy consideration is cross-border collaboration, because obviously you can digitalize as much as you like, but if you've got a lot of trade going on, it falls at the border. That's not going to be good to anybody. So again, cross-border, promote that cross-border collaboration and that digital connection. And hopefully we're going to hear a little bit about that in 2 sessions' time. So those are the policy considerations. You can see they're very much, policy considerations are more reflected to the regulatory community, as you can imagine. So that was a bit of a whistle-stop tour through the paper. There's a lot there. As I say, I would certainly recommend you download it and read it. And we're be very happy to take any questions, not necessarily now. Well, I'm very happy to take them, but if you have any questions once you've read the report, then please feel free to contact me or Ingrid or Peter as part of the BIA team and as part of the membership of the ICCR, and we'd be very happy to support that. And we're very happy as part of BIA's work to support particular discussions you may be having internally in country as well. One of our 4 key pillars of what we do at BIA is very much around helping members in consultations with their regulators. So if that's something you think we can help with, feel free. Does anybody have any questions about the report? I've got a hand up at the back. So if you wouldn't mind, name and organisation, please, before the question, just for everybody else's benefit.
Good morning, Diederik van Tiel from Advice Robo in the Netherlands. I've got a question about the data recommendations, because they look to me as a bit defensive. And what we see is that the market for lending is shifting from banks to neobanks and to tech companies, like you mentioned, Touch and Go over here, Grab. They're doing 35% of the market already. My question is, wouldn't it be wise also to include recommendations that advance the use of alternative data? Because it can be very beneficial for driving financial inclusion, for deeper and better credit scoring. And now it looks like a lot of hurdles are being put in place that kind of, make it more difficult to move in that direction. So can you elaborate a little bit on that, please?
Always a difficult first question, isn't it? No, it's a very good question. I think maybe the tone of what I presented didn't quite put it across. I think if you read the report recognises the benefit of the data. I think what it's trying to do is trying to balance the long-term sustainable use of the data. So it's really trying to make sure that what the ICCR wouldn't want, nobody really wants to do, is you just let this thing go, and then you end up with a big problem, and you get regulation coming in to pull it back. I think what we're trying to do is we recognise and understand that it is data that is important and can be used. It's just a matter of making sure that protecting the citizens and protecting businesses, that there is a framework there. So maybe I overestimated or emphasised the regulatory aspect, but no, the ICCR is very supportive of it and recognising it. That's why we did the paper. But I think as a standard-setting body, literally as a standard-setting body, we have an obligation to make sure that there are best practices and standards recommended to be put in place for the use of the data. So I'm not going to say we're not going to change them. Any other questions? I got one question out of you, so I'm doing well this morning. Maybe after a coffee break, I might get some more questions. But please, more questions to my guest speakers. I don't mind not getting questions, but it'd be nice for them too. Okay, well then let's move on, if I may, to Elias. Elias is from AMBC. He can explain a little bit more. Please come up, Elias, and he can explain a bit more about AMBC and what they do. But I'm intrigued as much as everybody else, I'm sure, to understand this Agri Bureau, which is his title, not mine. And you've got a clicker here and microphone, so over to you. Yes.
Great pleasure to be here, and I would like to thank Neil, Ingrid, and Pat for the support and the space here. I'm pleased to see Davi here from the Central Bank of Brazil, which we have a close, relationship there and partnership. So the idea today is to share with you what we have been designing in Brazil regarding the agro business and how credit can really bring a more comprehensive instrument to finance the activity and well-being for the small and familiar farmers. Okay. Well, Brazil is one of the strongest agro business worldwide. So it's the top large net food exporters, 182 tons. We are number one in coffee, sugar, orange juice. We also exporter of beef, protein, and we're the second exporter of cotton and fruits and pork. Fourth largest grain producer, and as well as expected by 2034, Brazil be probably the world's largest agricultural supplier. Richest country in fresh water resource globally, which also is an attractive, for AI, for training AI. Data centers are looking also to come to Brazil because of the water availability, okay? So just to give you some more ideas here, Brazil is to remain world leader in food supply. Brazil and China is strengthening, the agriculture partnership and cooperation. Farm jobs decline in Brazil as agribusiness is getting more technical, okay? And, well, it's sending also that Brazil has a potential to lead, worldwide the agribusiness. Something very interesting here is that the agro business is 23 to 25% of Brazilian GDP, but only 20% of the credit volume. So we have some space, to balance that. So we have a SAFRA plan, is the government program that last year was 400 billion reais. You divide that by 4 is $80 billion. Okay, and other resources, which will be the private sector, we're talking about 600 billion reais. Okay, so what are the challenges we have? First of all, high demand of capital intensive. For example, we need 2.6 million for machines and 4,000 reais by acre that we have on irrigation. We have an asymmetric risk information, okay, an informal relationship of credit granting, which is not good, okay? Growth in judicial recovery cases and investor distrust in agricultural business because of credit instruments. But we have one of our associates, they have a specific initiative named Agro Bureau too. And what can be seen here is that from 2018, have a composition that Hello? Yeah, much better. So sorry, I used to teach to Ms. Better, not to stand and enables proper credit pricing and fraud. Fraud is a big issue that we do have there, okay? So why data sharing matters again? Bureaus can support pre and post contract monitoring, cross-check data from SICOR and SCR. SICOR is a agro base that the central bank does have regarding the credit granted to the agro activity. SCR is the financial data that base that the central bank receives. And we have Joe environmental registries also that we can collect and use this data. Early alerts and transparency, can drive corrective actions and trust. Well, qualifying impact, score and fraud prevention. So the variables, production type, sustainability program, and certification, geolocation really matters, on this space of credit granting. And I think on that later we're going to talk about ESG. Ingrid is going to talk about that. So also enriching the scoring model, better borrower differentiation, prevents fraud as we have the CAR. The CAR, C-A-R, is a registry of the location where the farmer has. Because sometimes they go on fraud because they apply for a subsidized credit, but a different agent, and they have just one location. So with that, we can prevent, overtaking credit, because it's qualified as just one for location. The new database that we are talking with the central bank, we are talking about 170 gigabytes of data, 250 variables, and 300 tables of data. It's a lot of data. And we expect to receive that daily of twice a week. And those are SICOR, ICR, CAR, ProAgro, and NMF are the agro databases that we have split among different entities of the government. So the idea is to centralize that on a consortium, okay? And this is one small simulation that we have done here, that you see that we're going to have increase of 40.4% the scoring, okay? On the top, on the bottom here, you have the increase in scoring of the age of the farmer. The older the farmer, the higher the impact. This is interesting. And on the right-hand side, you have the variables, the increase by state. We have the north and northeast states. They're poorer regions of our country, and they will be more benefited, of this new score. Okay. Well, social and economics gains. Okay, promotes legal and environmental compliance. We have a strong environmental requirement for the agro in Brazil. We have the agro base there. They have to report if they have slavery, if you are using area that is, can I say, reserved, from agricultural. Normally, you have to use only 20% of the area that you have. 80% remain, as a part of sustainable. Strengthening access to sustainable credit, foster rural development and capital market confidence. Okay? The Agro Bureau agreement. Well, what we are talking about here in general, I'm talking about 3 entities. I think it's here. Okay, I think it's better. We received a request from the Ministry of Agriculture. Said, Elias, we need to do something like the positive data you had done in Brazil, in a way that we can foster the credit to come to the smaller and to the familiar farmers. okay? And I said at that time, so you know what? The best partner on that is the central bank. So we asked, we had a meeting with the central bank. Central bank was also enthusiastic about, you know, the initiative. And we're gonna have this agreement among, you know, ANBC, which is the Credit Association Brazil, okay? We have five credit bureaus there. We have Experian, we have Equifax, we have TransUnion, and we have two local bureaus. One is Quad, owned by the banks, and we have another one as SPC, which is owned by the retailers. Okay, so we have the 5 bureaus here, and we established a governance. We have a steering committee. The steering committee has a meeting monthly base, and we have weekly meetings on the technical and the legal side. Okay, the control mechanism and will be public policy and supervision. So we redesigned this agreement on a new format. Instead of sending data to the central bank, sending data to the Ministry of Agriculture, and you know what, we're going to do better than that. With the data that we receive, we will provide you a scorecard from the Ministry of Agriculture with indicators that can help them, you know, to strategize the public, you know, policy. And for the central bank, we're going to send them the analytics on using this data for supervision. Instead of them doing the supervision, the 5 bureaus are going to be able to send 5 visions of the supervision, and with that we can help the central bank. And what to expect as a result? You know, expansion of the agro credit and sustainable credit, banking spread and default rate reduction. How can I say, the delinquency in agro in Brazil is 4.7%. It's high. Okay. On the other side, the spread, the banking spread is 10.29%. So for every billion reais that you put on credit in Brazil in agro, you generated 3,000 new employees, directly and indirectly. For every 1 billion reais that you invest in agro in Brazil, you get 3.5 billion as a revenue. It's a multiplier. Okay? So those are the numbers that we have. We have, in Brazil today, we have 1.5 million transactions done by the government, subsidized, and 1.7 being done by a private sector. And in this program here, Central Bank is also managing to talk to the capital market and to receive also the capitalization information for the agro, that we can also receive that as part of the analytics. And we're going to provide the public, you know, those 2 scorecards. And the idea is to reduce fraud as a part of the initiative. And also, having this data with the credit bureaus, we will be able to foster, you know, new financial services by the private private creditors. Okay. Well, this is the dashboard agro. They are talking about credit risk, concentration risk, financial resilience, alerts, and trends. We are still to receive, you know, the dashboard that the central banks is studying, what they would like to receive from the credit bureaus. And actually, we will have a meeting on Thursday, and I receive a call today at 4:18 in the morning from the Ministry of Agriculture saying, you know what, we're going to move on that, and I propose to him to have a sandbox, start with a sandbox, to really start to evaluate what will be the impact. Well, dashboard integrated macro and micro credit data, daily updates, and enhance the governance and the risk signal across institutions. Okay. Program status today, we have 4 million active agro contracts. We have 7.706 billion on stock. We have new credit operations around 400 billion reais a year. And the Bureau blocked 5 billion reais. Okay, so this is without receiving the data. So the idea is really to improve that. Okay, next step. We're going to automate the monitoring, automate routines and monitoring the rural credit operation. We're going to use, we already been using artificial intelligence. We will talk about that tomorrow, okay? But the bureaus are already using intensively in Brazil. With the prioritization with the borrower data, okay? We to have that, we need to have a consent. Even in Brazil, we inherit, whatever is done in Europe, they copy in Brazil. But our data protection law, we have 10 legal bases. We were able to work with the legislator 4 years before, and we included the base number 10 that is legally, we can use it, the personal data for credit protection is in the law. Even if we have that on the law, we still prefer to ask for the consent, because at least we make, the consumer and also the companies aware that they are on control, okay? Well, final consideration, agro needs a modern credit infrastructure. The structure that we have today is not good, okay? Collaboration across sector and institution is key. So we're going to have in this consortium 3 players, as I mentioned. The notaries is looking for us, to send the data, say, what? You talk, with the Ministry of Agriculture. You share with the ministry will share with us. Because we would like this agreement on the first point to be direct, or with central bank, with the capital market, or, for example, with notaries, they do it directly with the Ministry of Agriculture. And with that, with our agreement, they can share. Data-driven bureaus enable smarter, fairer, and safer credit. So that's it. So this is what we have been doing in Brazil, and we are on the early stages, but we have the commitment from the central bank, we have the commitment from the Ministry of Agriculture, and we have the commitment for the 5 bureaus, because we understand that 25% of our GDP needs really a better instrument of credit, and the potential that Brazil does have on the agriculture. So the credit really is going to boost, the activity. And more than that, we are looking really to bring the credit to the small farmers and to the familiar farmers. Thank you very much.
Any questions for this? I've got one at the back there. Let's get a microphone. Bear with us. Name and organisation, please, if you don't mind. Just take that.
Hi, I'm Hari from Central Bank of Malaysia. I just want to thank you, Elias, for that. I just wanted to check on the Bureau scores, which you mentioned incorporates distinct aspects like climate risk data. What is the adoption or traction by banks or other financial institutions in using the scores for their credit underwriting processes? And are there any other incentives you provide to banks in terms of either credit guarantees or whatnot to encourage the adoption of these scores?
Well, what we have the agro program from Brazil. The banks, they are the agents, okay? So beyond being agents on this subsidized program, they also are agents on the capital market. So the banks have a very active role on that. And this is why even, the central bank is asking us from their metrics and what we have. We need to use this database and with your support to really monitor if the banks are really doing what was supposed to be done. As well, on the capital market, also have some indicators from the responsible for the capital market in Brazil to we supply some information regarding supervision. But mainly the banks they are a key role on that. But as I mentioned before, we have the cooperatives. So we have a credit cooperatives that they are very strong. They are really have a strong local presence. So they know. So this is sometimes to know is come up on a personal granting, which is not good. But at least we have a very strong credit distribution using the cooperatives that we have, which are spread out on 27 states that we do have in Brazil. Okay, question?
Hi,
Yeah, very good.
Anindita from Interlinkages Limited. Great presentation on the agri side of it. So I have a few fundamental queries around, how this program is structured, because number one, what we saw in terms of your data, that banks are not the fastest group which is increasing credit. These are the local, rural cooperatives or whatever name we give. 27% was with agri input players, right? So my query is expecting why banks are pre-selected in the model, number one. Number two, when you are looking at contracts value, right? A particular contract value is a trigger for coverage of farmers and for access to credit for that farmer. What exactly are we looking at contracts? That's number two. And number three is, because it has two problems. One is distribution, digitization. Second is understanding of the asset itself. Banks don't understand cattle as asset class. Banks don't understand a work in process of agri as an asset class or something that can be funded. And that's fundamentally creates a gap between the understanding of the bank, understanding of agri, and information play. So are you looking at creation and distribution of asset class like cattle as an asset class? Because these are, somewhere integrated between agri, financing, bureau data, and digitization. Thank you.
Okay.
You can
So
tell Indy's from an ex-banker, so you can tell that.
And I'm a master's in agri, so,
okay, what we have, we have the government program, okay? The government program, they have a set, of the amount will be granted, but we have also insurance, okay? It's part of the operation. A part of this credit, we have a part of that is insurance. They are, the banks that they end up signing up, an agreement with the government to receive those resources. They have to provide information, as I mentioned to you, the specific data being received by the central bank regarding those specific programs. By the way, I'm having a hard time now today because they are finishing the agro program in Brazil. It's going to be finishing this month, so I'm not getting too much attention from them because it's very intensive, and they are monitored, by the central bank. They have a specific program, specific metrics, and one of the things that we are doing is really to improve those supervision using the data that we're going to receive. And the other point is the cooperatives that we have. They are also subjected to the same rules, and they are also supervised by the central bank. So we have those two capillarities, to serve, the market. And what we need is really to get the credit activity on more a professional way, okay? Let me give an idea. Here I can talk because just happened. We have a flood on the south of Brazil, south state of Brazil, named Rio Grande do Sul. And the government, what emergency credit for the small farmers. So they send it. You know how much was the average credit grant there. No, it was 2 million reais average. Yeah, no, 2 million reais. I'm talking about for $400,000. So $400,000 didn't go, to the small ones. This is the problem, no? And this is the pain that the central bank said, Elias, we saw the big ones taking the credit, and the small ones, they don't have access. So I said, I said, well, we end up having dinner, having this conversation. What I think we can help you, and you can help us, on our business standpoint. And this is also what we started the conversation with the Ministry of Agriculture and also the central bank, because the purpose is really to foster the small farmers. And the credit was supposed to go there, but the big groups end up, getting the credit. And if you remember here, you have a huge space for the small businesses to get automated and really to promote the economy to Brazil be the number one. So this is really part of the strategy. The big ones, they have resources, but we need to put resources to the small ones, to they become medium, and the familiar to become small, and so on. So this is what the path that we are looking in Brazil.
Great.
Okay?
Thank you, Elias. Thank you very much for that. It's very useful. Thank you. You may, yeah, it's fine. You may go. As I'm going to make as there's a question in the back, I'm going to have to just move on if you don't mind, and maybe you can pick up with Elias over the coffee break. I was going to say that's food for thought, but that's a terrible joke, isn't it, really? But anyway, it's. I hope it has been enlightening, because I think it's a useful further development of the use of data and how it can be used in credit granting and how it can enable financial inclusion, so it's really good. So we move on to a slightly different subject now, which is cross-border. We're running a little bit behind time. I know some of you are probably desperate for a coffee soon, but I'd like to ask Jennifer from the Korean Credit Bureau to join us and talk about some of the work that they've been doing. They've been very active in this space, so it'd be good to hear from them. And then Roth from CBC is going to follow on with some discussions about what Cambodia has been doing. As Colin mentioned in his outset, Cambodia has been doing a lot of work with a number of other countries as well. So between the two of them, hopefully you'll get a good idea of what can be done in the cross-border. So Jennifer, you're welcome to use this or to use your microphone. It's up to you. Okay, thank you. So please welcome Jennifer.
Move slides, right? Thank you very much, distinguished delegates. I'm very honored to speak at the APRCC meeting of the ICCR. So I truly value the opportunity to share insights and also engage in meaningful discussions about the credit reporting industry with dedicated professionals gathered here today. Today is a privilege to speak at this meeting and also co-speak along with Mr. Ross with CBC in Cambodia, which is our value partner. Today, I will talk about how KCB has made efforts to improve financial inclusion by launching the cross-border service. KCB's presence at this ICCR meeting is first. So for some of you who may not be familiar with KCB, let me start with a brief introduction of our company and move on to the main topic. So KCB was founded in 2005 with 18 financial companies participating as shareholders. And these 18 major financial companies account for more than 80% of the Korean credit market. Only this year, we proudly celebrated our 20th anniversary. And over the past 2 decades, we experienced remarkable growth, becoming a model for many bureaus in Asia. So as for our member companies, we have a number of member companies in the Korean credit market, and they account for more than 90% of the retail credit market of Korea. And we are also actively partnering with fintech companies through a variety of initiatives. So KCB's credit database covers almost 100% of the economically active population based on this broad membership. And it's about 90% of the total population of Korea. So our company has grown rapidly in the past 2 decades, and we think that there are several factors behind the KCB's remarkable success, but I'd like to point out three main factors. First one is the speedy reporting and data delivery, and second one is highest quality of data, and third one is the stable and reliable system. So I think this one it will be the main topic of today. And as you may know well, cross-border credit reporting has been discussed a lot in the global credit reporting industry. While there is a broad consensus for the need for the cross-border service, in reality, very few regions in the world have achieved truly two-way reciprocal data exchanges due to legal and regulatory constraints and also data privacy concerns. And now let me give you the service development background for our service and how we have achieved with CBC in Cambodia. So to give you the background, South Korea is experiencing a significant population decline and an aging workforce, so leading to concerns about future economic growth and social stability. So to address the lack of available workers, the South Korean government is implementing various policies to attract foreign residents in Korea. And also there is a growing trend of globalization, as you may know well. So as a result, the number of foreign residents in Korea have been rising by a large margin every year, as you can see on the slide. And the percentage accounts for more than 5% of the total population as of this year. So let me give you more details. This service was necessary because the government, financial companies, and consumers each there had their own reasons for supporting it. The Korea, as I mentioned, the government is implementing policies to streamline the immigration process for foreign residents, making it easier for them to find employment and settle in the country. And as the number of foreign residents in Korea increases, their demand for loan is also growing. The financial institutions want to expand the customer portfolio to identify new customers, but they often face challenges due to a lack of information that can be used for credit evaluation. And also there is a higher risk of non-repayment, right? Because if the immigrants or foreign residents suddenly return to their home country, financial institutions don't have any way to recover the loan. And from the perspective of consumers who are new to Korea, they want to get credit from mainstream financial institutions, but cannot but to resort to higher interest rate loans because they become just no-filers as soon as they come to Korea. So against this backdrop, we have developed a cross-border credit service based on consumer consent. And this service was officially launched early this year in collaboration with Credit Bureau Cambodia, both in Korea and Cambodia. So to elaborate on Korean banks' challenges and pain points, they remained actually so far remain very hesitant to offer especially unsecured loan products to foreigners, as they didn't have much information, and as I said, there is a higher risk of non-repayment. So actually, we analyzed the data, and if banks give credit to foreigners, there is a slightly higher delinquency rate than the normal loans. However, recently within the financial industry, there is a growing recognition of the need to enhance credit evaluation models for foreigners in order to expand lending opportunities. So to this end, KCB is offering solutions to resolve their pain points. First one is the cross-border data service, as I mentioned, to use their home country's credit files. And secondly, just for your information, we have already offered a specialized credit score only for foreigners, and will soon offer alternative-based scoring solutions based on such as remittance data. So to make this cross-border service work, we have conducted comprehensive legal reviews in collaboration with legal experts. And under the Korea's Personal Information Protection Act, it's legally permissible to transmit a Korean consumer's credit report to a foreign country, provided that the individual gives informed and explicit consent. Of course, there are additional compliance requirements to consider beyond this foundational rule, but the key takeaway is this. So if the consumer is properly informed and gives consent, the credit report can be lawfully transmitted overseas. So I think you may be interested in how Korean consumers can give their consent to allow their credit report to be viewed by parties overseas, such as financial companies in Cambodia. So let me show you the consent link of Korean consumers. Actually, for this service, we have developed the cross-border platform, the portal, which can be used by financial companies overseas. So let's assume that a Korean consumer makes a loan application in Cambodia, and we have partnership with CBC. And portal users, such as financial companies staff members, make a request on KCB's cross-border portal to check the credit history of the Korean applicant. Then the Korean consumer in question will automatically receive this consent link, and if once the consumer opens the link, it directs to the consumer to the consent page. So once ID verification is done, consumers will see the consumer consent as shown on the right side. So since this is a unique link for the specific consumer, they will just confirm the details of country name and institution name because they are already pre-filled, and read two consents, which are consent to provision of third parties and also to the transfer of their credit data overseas. And after checking two consent boxes, they just click on the OK button. Then the portal users, the staff members of financial companies, for example, in Cambodia, will receive the notification that the credit report is ready, as the consented credit report is uploaded on the portal. So now they can review the credit report of a Korean consumer. So finally, I'd like to outline our future directions and share the key takeaways based on our experiences. So for the cross-border service, we will take a three-phase approach. In the first phase, we already successfully launched the service in collaboration with CBC in Cambodia, a significant milestone in our journey. And in the second phase, we plan to expand the scope of cooperation to include a wider range of foreign residents in Korea, so that more consumers from various countries can benefit from improved credit access. And lastly, in the third phase, we aim to further enhance our service through standardization efforts, and while also exploring ways to report payment performance data occurred in Korea back to their home country, if possible. So thereby we can achieve the true cross-border credit reporting system. The benefits are very clear. Accessible financial services can be provided to foreigners or immigrants during their initial settlement in Korea. So let me share some key takeaways and key lessons we have identified. The first, it's very essential to carefully review and fully comply with legal and regulatory requirements. So legal compliance builds the foundation for stable service operation. And secondly, ongoing and transparent communication with the regulatory body is very critical. So given the sensitive nature of consumer credit data, the regulatory body is often taking a very cautious approach, as you may know well. So maintaining open dialogue and demonstrating strict compliance helps build mutual support and understanding. And last, earning consumer trust is vital also. So to address privacy concerns, we must design the system with transparency and security in mind. So this includes the user-friendly consumer consent process, so they can easily understand what they are agreeing to and agree to the use of their data. So I think the cross-border service, by doing so, we can take an important steps toward a real financial inclusion. So I'd like to wrap up my presentation with a good quotation from World Bank report. So cross-border credit data transfers should be facilitated where appropriate, provided that adequate requirements are in place. So I think that when data flows across borders, opportunities follow. Right? So financial inclusion can be achieved, especially those who need it most. So thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to network and engage in meaningful discussions during the conference. Thank you very much. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Any questions for Jennifer? Yep, a question at the front here. Name and organization, please.
Thank you very much for Jennifer for the very interesting presentation. I'm Alan Au from the Hong Kong Monetary Authority. I'm particularly interested in your talking about those new entrants into Korea. You probably try to obtain the credit data in their home country to facilitate the credit assessment. So my question is, does your bureau has to establish connections or discuss with individual foreign bureaus, credit bureaus, to establish this data transfer of those credit reports from their home country into Korea? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your good question. Yeah, you're right. So we established the individual framework with each credit bureau because as you may know well, each country has different jurisdictions over data privacy and credit access and credit data transfer. So it will be better there will be a whole community to participate, but some bureaus are hesitant still and because of the regulatory body regulation issues. So we are now approaching an individual approach. So we are talking with each bureau in each country to have a partnership So CBC is our first partner, and we are now expanding partners across Asia first, and we'd like to expand to other continents, also United States or Canada, where because there are many foreign nationals who are coming to Korea from those countries. So, if possible, we'd like to have a partnership with Hong Kong too. I look forward to that.
Any other questions for Jennifer? Jennifer, thank you very much. I'm sure you can get some questions over break and next couple of days, but thank you very much for that. Thank you. I think Korea's always had a strong reputation of being very digitalized and very advanced, and it was interesting to see that consent on a mobile phone, which is good to see. So next up is Ross, as I've mentioned. So Ross, please join me and talk a bit more about, you've already had a little bit of pre-marketing about what CBC have been doing, but maybe just expand a little bit more. I think you can use this one. Okay, take that one. So clickers here, over you go. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, so good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm brought from Cambodia. I think it's been my pleasure coming here the second time, just sharing you the milestone and then journey of Cambodia in terms of the cross-border credit report sharing. Yep. First, actually, for those who do not know CBC, so CBC is a private credit reporting in Cambodia. We are the only one and then operate in Cambodia for 13 years now. We pretty much cover in Cambodia. I think we cover all bank, microfinance, leasing, and then other rural credit institutions in Cambodia. So totally we have 197 members. And in terms of coverage, I can say that Cambodia is a country of 7 million population with around 11 million adult population. The fact is that in Cambodia, we are covering more than 70% of the adult population in the country already in the credit bureau. And since we are talking about the cross-border credit report sharing, I know that it's a very hot topic. It's not a pressing topic recently, but it's just last decade. It's already been a very challenging initiative already with a movement of the global workforce around the globe actually on this one. And I'm sure that whenever individuals trying to move from one country to other, they face a very difficulty in terms of access to finance, since they cannot establish a proper credit reporting and they cannot transfer their credit report from the home country to the host country. That is a most, I think, a pressing issue in which we are happening. And I'm sure that with that one, the objective of cross-border credit report sharing, sure, it serves the primary purpose of the credit bureau to enhance the credit risk assessment from the lender, to ensure that the lender have a 360 view of their prospect borrower, and then they can lend responsibility. So that is a primary objective of credit cross-border. But somehow cross-border also can enhance its objective to cover somehow, for example, for screening of the employment process as well, because I'm sure that some country, they need to check a credit bureau for screening process. Is there any ability for them to check? Let's say, for example, if you are working in Singapore, they require you to check fit and proper from a credit bureau. We also end up with Cambodia, for example, working in Singapore. I imagine in the last 5 years, they need to fly back from Singapore to Cambodia, check credit report, and then present that credit report to those employers. Why don't we make this one happening? So those are the synergy. And I believe that the cross-border also can take a lot of initiative or can also support financial inclusion as well. So those are what we believe. And since credit reporting is a very highly regulated, I'm sure that a clear support from regulator is really needed. Through our experience engaging a lot on that cross-border, we know that a lot of bureaus are willing to move, but we have a lot of constraint with regulation. Whether there's no any regulation or whether some regulator ignore that one. And it's good I received one question from one regulator, whether it's a good business case or not to look into that cross-border credit report sharing. I myself saying that it's not a good business case. I don't guarantee the return on investment from that the cross-border, but anything in which we can facilitate our citizens whenever they moving out to the host country. So strong support from regulator is not only enable the credit bureau to share those sensitive data across the border, but also build the trust for other party who involved in those data sharing mechanism. And I am sure that luckily in Cambodia, I think under the National Bank Cambodia support NBC, in which is our regulator on credit reporting, they are quite supportive on that initiative. If you look originally into our practice on credit reporting, it doesn't allow Credit Bureau Cambodia to operate or to share data across the board. I still remember, I think maybe last 7 years, I think with our current governor asked support from Peter from IFC, Neil from BIA, why don't you guys just come up and then review our practice on credit reporting? Is there anything in which we cannot do? So one of the areas is enable us to do a cross-border credit report sharing. That's why I think in 2020, the central bank adopted the revision of the practice on credit reporting and enable us to do that cross-border credit report sharing. That's why I think we have launched our first initiative with Singapore back in 2023. That is our first bilateral cross-border credit reporting within ASEAN. Only Cambodia and Singapore we can make it. All those, the MOUs, the agreement signed in 2023, but the hard job is being done, I think, 7 years before that one. A lot of backward and forward discussion. So bear in mind that Cambodia and Singapore somehow will share similar shareholding structure, and then it's even very difficult whenever we talk about this one, just only both regulators come together, NBC and MA, they come together and then agree, why don't you pilot testing that one? That's why I think it make it happen. And I can truly say that the mechanism is very manual because it depending on the, I think, risk appetite of both regulator. To what extent a regulator want us to go. So that is the thing. But learning from the experience from Cambodia and Singapore, and then it's good that Jennifer already mentioned about the cross-border credit report sharing with Korea. So I think just last April, we are able to launch another second milestone, which is outside ASEAN, I think with Korean on that initiative. The process in which we are working with Korea is more digital, I can say that. So what Jennifer has presented you about the KCB platform, so Cambodia, we do have our platform, so consent, everything is the same. Yep. That's why I think some of our peer credit bureau asking us, what are the mechanisms in which you're doing all those cross-border? To me, you can make this process complicated, or you also can streamline the process. But to us, since we don't want to make a huge investment on this one, we do not expect a good return on investment. That's why we utilize our current and existing infrastructure. But everything is based on the consent from the end consumer. So there's a segregation of the role between the source bureau and then processing bureau. What are the role responsibility in which we are doing? At the end of the day, the source bureau need to make sure that the customer do provide consent to access into their credit reporting as of now. However, I can share you that there's a lot of things in which we can make it better, I think, from that journey, in which I mentioned to you, for example, working in Singapore, the consent verification we do on menu. So that is what the regulator asks us to do. Everything, for example, the processing bureau need to call the consumer from the source bureau whether you provide consent or not. Whether we don't want to move away from that one, we really want to move toward that digital, but it is something in which the regulator asks us to do that one. That's why whenever we do with Korea, we move that one now to digital. No need to call anymore. You have your platform now, so just the end consumer just do KYC through that platform only. But whether it's the best option, not yet. Because let's say from my experience now, I have engagement with 2 countries already, and then I see there will be some trouble for my member bank microfinance whenever I have engagement with a third country. For example, now, the process in which I do with Singapore, for example, there will be a KYC from Singapore toward the consumer, and then whenever they request, they need to go through a different channel. This is number one. So now I go with Korea, another digital, but my member need to log into KCP platform, for example, to request that cross-border credit report sharing. If I go with a third country, there will be a third platform. That's why I think looking forward, we are trying to review, is there anything in which we can do and then make sure that our member can log into our own platform can interact with a third-party bureau. That is what we are trying to looking for. Sure, from a technology background, there's nothing, I think, not difficult at all because we have the platform already, but just the connectivity and whether the regulator or the credit bureau in other country allow that mechanism to go through or not. So I think that is the way moving forward in which we plan to do. And we're also happy to work with other countries as well in terms of the cross-border credit report sharing or in terms of knowledge sharing in regarding to that space as well. So that is all for me, Neil. Thank you.
Thank you, Ross. I think there's always this element of how do you match data from different data structures as well. But no, it's good to see. Any questions for Ross? Yes, give him one question. He owes a question. Maybe go. I'll take that one. Is that working? Yeah, it's fine.
Leonardo Lapalorcha from the Indonesian credit, one of the Indonesian credit bureaus. Have any other ministries expressed interest or, in any case, shown themselves sensible to these social issues? Now we're talking about people that are exposed, that are weak, that are in economic distress, that are in new places. So I think it's more of a social issue. And as you said before, it's a limited business opportunity for bureaus. No? There's a lot of hurdles and a lot of complexity to solve. Do you receive any support from, I don't know, Ministry of Labor, Ministry of Transmigration, or other sort of stakeholders?
I think that is a good initiative. Let's say, for example, between the case of Cambodia and then Korea, there's a good support already from both Ministry of Labor and then Ministry of, I think, Foreign Affairs as well. Since we have a lot of Cambodia, I think, settling in Korea, and then they are quite difficult in terms of accessing to finance. That's why I think we are having discussion with them, and then the Ministry of Labor and then Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they know this one. They say, wow, they are quite supportive. And now we are going to another page in which our Ministry of Foreign Affairs saying that initiative is very good. Now they will try to let our ambassador in other countries know this initiative, and then maybe doing, let's say, pre-matching or advocacy to do that cross-border credit for with other countries. I agree with that one.
Yeah, I think that's a very useful comment about engaging as many different parts of government as you can in the process. So good question. Thank you. Any other questions for Ross? No? Well, you got one. Well done. Great. Thank you, Ross.